You're listening to Life and Love, the private revelations of Charlotte Younger. I'm Brian Coyne, your host, and this is episode 4.
You're listening to Life and Love, the private revelations of Charlotte Younger and her enlightening conversations with our Lord and Savior. Join your host, Brian Coyne, to share in these words of God's divine love for each and every one of us.
Okay, this week's episode is called Suffering. And we are going to talk about the suffering that Charlotte endured. We're going to look at a writing where she gets a message from Jesus explaining to her why he's letting her suffer the way he is, and how her suffering, what it does for the mystical body of Christ and the redemption of souls in union with his sacrifice on the cross. But before we do that, we'll hear an excerpt from a talk by Peter Kreeft. Peter Kreeft, a Boston College philosophy professor and a highly decorated and highly renowned speaker on philosophy and theology. And we were given special permission to play a little snippet of one of his talks on suffering, and it's related to his book called Making Sense of Suffering, all about answering the question, why? Why, God? Why suffering? Why me? Peter Kreeft writes a fantastic book about it, and you'll get a little excerpt from a speech that he gave, courtesy of my buddy Dave Nevins, who is now the reason why Peter Kreeft has a website and why Peter Kreeft's books and, or at least his audio recordings, are now selling online, both on Amazon.com and on iTunes. So, we'll put a link up on the website. If you like what you hear, you can get more for only $1 per talk. It's amazing. Something like that. And you can learn more about Peter Kreeft thanks to Dave Nevins at davenevins.com. Then we'll hear more from my sister Christine Coyne-Fino about what it was like to watch Charlotte suffer and how Charlotte coped. And then we will hear from a Baltimore firefighter named Stan Hunkovich, who, when he was in his early 20s, was helping Charlotte, doing grocery shopping for her, fixing things around the house. He was being a good neighbor to her. And now he's battling and suffering to win back his children who were kidnapped by his wife from Trinidad. And that's Gabriel and Anastasia, his 2 children, 4 years ago, were just taken out of the country. Somehow his wife planned this out and kidnapped the kids and took them back to Trinidad. And now it's a sort of a national battle for custody that he's trying to win. And we're going to hear from him, his memories of Miss Charlotte, and we'll find out more about how we can learn more about his story and how we can help out Stan. But before we hear from Peter Kreeft, it's time to share the love.
Let's share the love.
Okay, it's time to share the love. This is where we go to the mailbag and read what we've been hearing from you guys. And I promise you, if you write in and you write something good, we'll do our very, very best to read it on the next episode. And today's feedback is from Christine Perello, and she writes the following. She wrote this on our website, commenting on episode 1. Thank you, Brian Coyne, for making God's revelations available to us all. I think sometimes we forget that God continually reveals himself to us, and not just through Holy Scripture. I have never been the recipient of locutions, but I am grateful that he spoke through Charlotte and that you are making them accessible. I hope I will always be tuned into God's frequency. I hope I will always be tuned into God's frequency. Thank you, Christine Perello. Very well-written comment. Wow. You sure have a handle on the English language. I am very, very happy to be sharing Charlotte's writings, and I'm glad that you enjoyed episode 1. And thank you so much for the encouragement. That means a lot. I always need encouragement because this type of thing, it's a labor of love. By the way, if you have a comment or a question regarding Charlotte's writings or anything we've talked about here on the podcast, and you would like to write it in, we'll be happy to read it on the next episode, or we will try our very, very best to share it. Now, if you're not the writing type and you would rather voice your question or thought or comment, we're going to have a feature on our website at lifeandlovewords.com where it's called a speak pipe, and you can just click the little record button and talk away. And then we'll try our very, very best to put that segment or part of what you said on the next show or on a subsequent show if it's more relative to a different theme. So there's 2 ways right there that you can be a part of the next Life and Love, Private Revelations of Charlotte Yanger podcast. And now that we've shared the love, let's hear a little bit about suffering from a talk that Peter Kreeft gave a couple years back, and my buddy Dave Nevins was able to audio record and turn into an MP3, along with many other Peter Kreeft talks, which are amazing, by the way. And here's a little snippet that we got permission of DaveNevins.com. Here goes, Peter Kreeft on suffering.
I titled my book, Making Sense Out of Suffering. What is sense? Sense means an explanation. Unlike the animals, we don't simply accept things as they are, unless we're pop psychologists. We ask, we question, we wonder. We ask especially the question, why? And when we're adults, we usually ask it only once. That's why adults are not philosophers. Little children ask it infinitely, and that's why they're philosophers. Mommy, why? Because. Why? Because. Why? They keep going. Let's start with Viktor Frankl. A wonderful book, Man's Search for Meaning. One of the half-dozen books I'd make everybody in the world read at gunpoint if I possibly could for the survival of sanity and civilization. He is a Viennese psychiatrist who survived Auschwitz, but didn't just survive it. He played Socrates in Auschwitz. He asked questions. For instance, what makes people survive? And his answer is, Freud is wrong, it's not pleasure. Adler is wrong, it's not power. Even Jung is wrong, it's not integration or understanding the archetypes or anything like that. It's meaning. Those who found some meaning in their suffering survived, even though all the other indications predicted that they wouldn't. And those who didn't. He writes, to live is to suffer. Therefore, if life has meaning, suffering has meaning too. That seems to me to be utterly logical. The corollary is that if suffering does not have meaning, then life does not have meaning, because to live is to suffer. He observed that different people had different answers to their question. Why are we suffering this absurd and agonizing thing? But all the answers had one thing in common. They all turned a corner from asking the question, life, what is your meaning? To realizing that life was questioning them by name. What is your meaning? And they could only answer the question by action, not just by thought. And those who believed in a God behind life asked the same question of God. God, why me? What are you doing? Why? And those that turned the corner realized that God was questioning them, which is exactly what happened to Job. When God showed up, he didn't give answers, he gave questions. How Socratic God is.
So that was an excerpt from a Peter Kreeft talk on suffering related to his book, Making Sense of Suffering, which I highly recommend. And you can hear the entire talk if you go to DaveNevins.com, where he has a podcast. He's interviewed Peter Kreeft a couple times. He's used his audio recordings of Peter Kreeft talks, put them up there. Some are for free, some cost a couple bucks. All linked up there on iTunes, where you can download it from iTunes or Amazon. DaveNevins.com. Thank you, Dave. Shout out to you, my man. And now, regarding suffering, that's something that we all ask God, why? The question why. And Peter Kreeft suggests, and Viktor Frankl suggests, that if we can make sense out of suffering, if we can get a reason for it, it's going to be more bearable. Charlotte asked God many, many times in her writings, why this stupid hip? Why this headache? Why these physical ailments? Why was she sick all the time? And she got many answers. Now, it sure would be nice if we all got answers like Charlotte got. But I'm going to share with you one of the answers that she got from Jesus here. This talk is from 1991, and it's entitled The Redemptive Value of Suffering, from November 18th, 1991, and it was a Sunday night going into Monday morning, 12:30 a.m. And here's what God had to say to her.
The Redemptive Value of Suffering, November 18th, 1991, Monday, Sunday night, 12:30 a.m. Jesus. Child, I am pleased with your cries of thanksgiving and appreciating my mercy and long suffering with you throughout your life. Remember, everything that was permitted, that you call your uglies, helped to bring you to the point where you are today. Now it is time to go on to see the redemptive value of suffering and pain and its main purpose of being God and a soul to perfect unity of intellect and will. You are realizing my love for you was and is to bring you closer and closer to me, to God, and to fulfill the reason for your creation, and especially of the creation of your immortal soul. Poor human beings who are so mesmerized by fun of the world and the inspirations of self-will, others' self-will, and the promptings of the evil one himself, who indeed is always on the prowl, seeking those who he may destroy by his sly methods of trickery and deception, which human nature, without the infusion of the divine will, succumbs to these influences. Yes, indeed, there is a spiritual warfare continuously in action, where the bomb site is not a man-made target, but the immortal soul. The true essence of a human's worth lies not in accomplishments or possessions, but the holiness and purity of his soul. Let me continue to open your spiritual eyes to depths still unknown to you. Let me have my way with you. Listen and obey. You will never be sorry for your response to me, my oh so littlest one. Yes, one day you will stop saying, fattest, biggest one, but see more with these spiritual eyes the deeper meaning of life's existence, purpose, and eternal unity with which God has created humans for, man's true final destination. Remember, man is destined for an eternal existence, for a soul can never cease to be. But its final resistance is entirely up to him, and his free will for mankind's tendency is his will be done, not God's will. Child, I have not forgotten how you have tried to leave your will at all my tabernacles. You were such a babe, and had to learn it must be yours to give or retain each and every moment. Just as you learned that lesson well after so many tries, you will indeed learn, and after so many tries, also to accept all I desire and have and want for you, my oh so littlest of little ones. O Lord, forgive me for all my failures. Thank you with all my heart and soul for putting up with me for so long. Child, habits formed a long time ago and in use are indeed so hard to let go. It's not always an instant turning around. Just like in other sicknesses, the medicine may take a while, and even the doses may taste distasteful to the selfish self that likes to have its own way, and certainly knows how to pamper itself, not thinking always, is this right or wrong, but plunges selfishly into whatever at the moment is its wants. Be not dismayed, child. God is always willing to help a struggling soul whose desire it is to please me and wants to answer the prayer for help and enlightenment.
Okay, so I wanted to touch on a couple points there. I think it's really cool in the first paragraph how Jesus says, I'm pleased with your cries of thanksgiving and appreciating my mercy and long suffering with you throughout your life. That tells me that when we suffer, God suffers with us, and that he's there with every single bit of pain. And that he explains that the reason for Charlotte's sufferings and for all our sufferings is to bring us closer and closer to him. And yet that there are distractions of the devil all around, and how people are mesmerized by fun. And that the devil's goal, his bomb sight, is on our immortal soul. That's pretty heavy too. Next, Charlotte didn't enjoy being called Jesus' littlest one because she was of large bill. And the sicker she got, and the more years that went by that she was bedridden, the more weight she put on, and weight ran in the family, and most of her sisters were big, and so she hated that about herself. And yet, Jesus called her my littlest of little ones. And he said, yes, one day you will stop saying fattest, biggest one, but see more with these spiritual eyes, the deeper meaning of life's existence. That was a big struggle for Charlotte. On top of the unattached right hip of hers, and her swollen right leg that she called Dumbo, and all her pains, and her shoulder hurt, and her underarms hurt so much when she would get around on the crutches around the house. Her underarms were always aching her. Then the tendinitis in her shoulder. On top of that, the migraines. On top of that, the ovarian cancer that left her with complications and bladder issues. And on top of that, she just had mysterious sicknesses all the time. And also, when Charlotte learns through the writings that when she gave her will to God back in 1973, that wasn't the end of it. Jesus constantly reminds her that she's supposed to give her will to him regularly, moment by moment, as he always says. So Charlotte would make a little point to hand her will over to Jesus every time she saw a tabernacle in a Catholic church. So she would leave her will at that tabernacle. And finally, in the last paragraph, be not dismayed, child. God is always willing to help a struggling soul whose desire is to please me. God is always willing to help a struggling soul. That gives me solace, and I think it should give you solace too. All right, that's our reading for episode 4. Now we're going to hear from my sister, Christine Coyne, who speaks from firsthand experience living with Charlotte during Charlotte's most painful years, the 1990s, all the way up until her death on September 28th, 1994.
And suffering, too. The big thing was that she was suffering so much, and I remember I even said to her one time in an argument, we were having some argument, and it was so much to handle, everything that she needed. And I said to her, I don't know what I was being, but we were having some sort of little argument because I had my feathers ruffled. I don't know what it was about. And I remember saying, well, I just can't handle your pain anymore. I said that in a way just because I felt like, oh, I'm so overwhelmed, And and I remember the look on her face and she quietly just turned away and said, well, think about how I can handle my pain. And it hit me that she had to deal with it every single minute and every second. And here I was complaining that I had to help her, in my selfish way. So it was, I felt horrible. And, I mean, to this day, when I think about how I could have been so much kinder, and I wasn't always, it was just a normal relationship where we would have arguments and she was always right and I was usually wrong. But
think about it, if she were the 24-year-old healthy girl and you are the 57-year-old cripple, would she have been a perfect angel looking after you? Probably not. Are you still there?
I guess it would be hard for the younger person to understand.
Yeah. When she
sorry.
was young,
Can you hear me?
said, when she was young, she said all she wanted to do was go, 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 and, do things and be out and about. And so she was a kid once too.
Yeah, that's true.
And then my sister Christine and I got talking about the car accident that Charlotte was in the 1950s that killed her best friend, Alverti, and Alverti's brother. And Charlotte always wondered why God spared her, because she felt that at the time her soul was in mortal danger. And she worried so much about the souls of her two friends who died in that car accident. And this was something that plagued her for years, the question why. She would ask me when I was 5 or 6 years old, she'd be crying, why did God not let me die? Why did he save me? Why am I still here? And I had no answer for that. Well, we hired mygenealogist.com to do some research on Charlotte, and they found the newspaper article about the car accident from 1956. And I'm going to read it to you here. It's from the Baltimore Sun, and I find this chilling. Baltimore Sun, 1956. Wow, I don't have the exact date, do I? Well, maybe I do. We'll see. And it's in the articles, man, 22, convicted in auto killings. Joseph B. White, 22, yesterday was convicted of auto manslaughter in the death of 2 persons, killed when an automobile in which they were riding collided head-on with the defendant's car last March 24th on the Key Highway at Micomas Street. Judge E. Paul Mason, who ruled that White was speeding and on the wrong side of the street at the time of the collision, deferred imposition of sentence pending a probation report. Judge Mason said he thought a prison sentence should be imposed. Victims of the accident were Herman J. Arndt, 45, and his sister-in-law, Mrs. Alverta Arndt, 32, of 10th Avenue, Brooklyn Park. A third passenger in the Arndt car was critically injured. That's Charlotte. They didn't even know her name, and they wrote it. J. Robert Brown prosecuted the case. White, who lives in the 1200 block of Cooksey Street, testified he does not have a clear recollection of the accident. Now, that's 1956. He was 22, so that makes him about 34 years old at the time. I'd love to know if this Joseph B. White is still living, because how cool would it be to find him and let him know that the woman that God spared in that accident that he caused from his drunk driving was, let's say, a mystic in constant communication with Jesus, and now there's a podcast about her. To me, that would be pretty neat. Here is the obituary that mygenealogist.com found of Charlotte's best friend who died in the car accident, Alverta Arndt. And by the way, Alverta's husband was drunk, and they were staging an intervention to go help him again. And that's where they were heading when they got hit by this Joseph White guy. Alverta's obituary. And this was Charlotte's best friend. Suddenly on March 20... Oh, no, here it is. Suddenly on March 24th, 1956... Wait a second. Suddenly on March 24th, 1956, Alverta S. Arndt, beloved wife of Kurt A. Arndt, and daughter of Walter and Ida Gregoski Shermieski, funeral from her home, 2 West 10th Avenue, Brooklyn Park, on Tuesday at 2 p.m., interment in Cedar Hills Cemetery. Now let's pick up where we left off with my conversation with my sister, Christine Coinfino, about that very car accident that Charlotte was in back in 1956.
Do you know what year the car accident was?
I have that in some documentation, but it was in the 50s. It was in the 1950s. And I have the newspaper clipping announcing that there was three people died in the car. No, 2 people died in the car accident, and there was 1 survivor in that car, and that was Charlotte. They didn't mention her name in the article. The kid who was driving the car, he survived too, and has no recollection because he was so drunk when he slammed into her car. And That was
Wow.
a very fortunate occasion for Charlotte. That's why she had, let's say, ruptured intestines, and she had incontinence and had to go to the bathroom like frequently. And
Yeah.
she also had a scar on her forehead from that car accident. Right?
Mhm. She also had cancer, ovarian cancer, and I believe had to have a hysterectomy, which, only furthered her medical issues later, which when she was just, her body was deteriorating, and which, added to her incontinence.
Oh, I didn't know about that type of cancer. Wow. I didn't know she had ovarian cancer.
And she was certain that her cancer was caused by the impact of the accident, because she said all of her internal organs were compacted, and I know she had internal bleeding and all sorts of things after the accident, and she believed that the cancer was a result of everything that had happened, which I guess can happen. I mean, cells can be damaged, and so I mean, she never claimed to have any kind of medical knowledge, but she felt in her heart that that's where the cancer came from, which eventually they were able to get rid of the cancer, but it left her with a lot of problems.
Yes.
So that was a good 20 years, like in the 50s and then to the 70s when Wally, when all that happened with Wally.
That's right. So she she had medical issues even through her marriage and into the 70s when they split, the early 70s.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And for the record, Charlotte told us that Wally attacked her or chased her out of the house. And as Charlotte was running through the doorway, Wally crushed the door on her and thus breaking her hip.
Very close. It was actually in the basement. And Wally had a secret room down there that was closed off. And he had built it in the basement. And he was always having his friends over, his guy friends, and they were watching movies down there and, just hoo-hawing and drinking and whatever else they were doing down there. And she knew that something was going on, and it had gotten to a point in their marriage where he didn't want her to be involved. And basically he wanted to be able to do what he could, and she had to leave him alone and cook for him and everything else. And so she, as her curiosity and her suspicion and everything of what was going on in the basement, and as she used to call them, his orgies that he was having.
Right.
So she one day went down and decided to go and find out what was going on. Snuck down in the basement, and when Wally realized that she had come down, he got so mad and chased her up the steps, the basement steps. And as she was getting through the basement door, he slammed it. Yeah, I think he grabbed it and pulled it towards her to keep her from getting out, because I guess he wanted to beat her up. And it hit her hip in a way that it knocked the ball of the hip joint off of the femur.
Wow.
And so and so then, but the strange thing is, I know that I think she had surgery and was still living there with him after the surgery. So I don't know if he apologized or how that worked out, or if he was going to try and change his life or had remorse. I don't know.
Yeah, that must have been a wild time in their marriage. That must have been a tough time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, and I think I remember Charlotte explaining it to me as a kid, that she went down there, and sure enough, he was cross-dressing, and he had come out of the closet, and I didn't quite know what that meant when I was 5.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, I guess he might have been cross-dressing or something like that.
Yeah. And she just referred to it all as all the filth.
All the filth.
The filth. And, yeah. And, when he was in World War II and earlier in their marriage, and she had a whole suitcase full of letters from him, and when she died, she asked me to just get rid of them, and I did. But I kept some of the Christmas cards and the love cards that they used to send to each other, and it was very sad. It was very bittersweet, because they had this love, and they would write to each other, "I love you forever and ever and ever," very simplistic and childlike, love for each other. And he did too. He would write to her from while he was in Germany or wherever he was stationed, and telling her how much he loved her and missed her. But the sad thing was when he came back, she realized that he had a mistress while he was in Germany. And she said that's when everything changed, everything about their marriage, because he had been exposed to filth, quote unquote.
Yes.
And when he came back, he was no longer satisfied with a regular marriage, with normal love. And she said that he didn't tell her about the mistress, but she knew. And then she confronted him, and he confessed. But she said that was what poisoned their marriage. Although she also felt that in his childhood he had been abused by his father, and thinks that he had homosexual tendencies from, just a young age. And she definitely attributed that to the way he was brought up. His father would chase him around with an inner tube from a tire and, beat him with it in the yard. And I think I remember a story where he was just a little kid and his father was hosing him off with a hose because he had done something wrong in front of everybody and that kind of thing. And she said that he really loved, just soft things and feminine things. So she would admittedly say she was very naive in their marriage, early when they were dating. She didn't realize, that he had emotional scars and was eventually became a cross-dresser and a homosexual and, with multiple partners and that kind of thing. And it was a very, a combination of a lot of things from his childhood and then the mistress, and just nothing satisfied him. He was looking for a love which he could never find, and the love that she had, which was real love, and normal love was not enough for him anymore. And then it just went downhill from there, and their marriage fell apart as a result.
And I have documentation of him marrying an Eleanor. Oh no, marrying Evelyn. He married a woman named Evelyn in 1972, or actually I think that was early 80s. But he officially divorced Charlotte in 92. We've got paperwork on that. But so he did find a new spouse, a woman. But he would torment Charlotte. He would do things to her house throughout the 80s, like put for sale signs on the house, or throw trash in her yard, or and stuff like that, which was awfully scary for me as a kid, because at nighttime, if Charlotte fell asleep and I was still awake and it was 2 a.m, I was always wondering, is Wally going to come by tonight? I was like on high alert for Wally. Some nights I couldn't sleep. So yeah, Charlotte was a straight shooter, but sometimes she told us too much. TMI, more than we needed to know as little kids. But that was her way.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, my big sister, Christine Coyne. You sure do have a great memory for detail. And if you like hearing from Christine, you're going to hear more from her as she wraps up her story in the next episode, episode 5, where she tells about Charlotte's death, experiencing Charlotte's death in the hospital there and leading up to it, and then moving out of her house. Now, earlier this week, I talked to Stan Hunkovich, who was and is a Baltimore firefighter who's fighting to get back his children, Gabriel and Anastasia, since they've been kidnapped 4 years ago by their mother and brought to her homeland in Trinidad against a U.S. court order. Stan was kind enough to spend some time on the phone with me and recount his memories of Miss Charlotte, things that he learned from her, experiences helping her go grocery shopping and such. And I think you're going to know right away that Stan is a class act, solid guy. And I even had the pleasure of going to a U2 concert with him when I was a little kid, and my brother used to hang out with him. And we're still close, and he's been trying very hard to raise money to win his children back, or at least to get pay the bills to all the lawyers. He's been having car washes and pot roasts, and he's just been doing all kinds of fundraisers. And he has a website called HunksKids.com if you'd like to find out more about his story. But here are his memories of Charlotte Yeager from the living in her neighborhood in the 1980s. Stan Hunkovich, Baltimore firefighter. The last time you and I hung out was in, I think it was in 1990 or 91 at a U2 concert. Do you remember that?
I sure do. Yep, I so do. Yep.
Yeah, that
It
was
me,
the.
your brother,
Uh-huh.
and another guy. I can't remember his name.
Ed Carroll, I think.
Yep, Ed Carroll. That's exactly right. Wow, that's a long time ago.
Do you ever get out to rock
It was
concerts
on the-
anymore?
No. All I've been doing lately is working and fighting for my kids, you know?
That's right. And you're also a paramedic firefighter. What kind of hours do you work there in Baltimore?
Well, our typical hours are two 10-hour days and then two 14-hour nights, and then we have 4 days off in between. There's there has been a big shortage of paramedics, and so I have been working a lot of what we call callbacks, or like overtimes, because there is a shortage, and I really need the funding right now for legal fees for fighting for my kids in an international battle.
Absolutely.
So,
So you're willing to work the extra hours if you get the call.
Oh, exactly. Yep.
Wow. And how about with the snowstorm in Baltimore? Have you been getting extra calls? Well, this has been a really busy winter in Maryland, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. And it's kind of crazy. You know, you would think it sometimes on days when you think it's going to be really busy, it's not. And on days when you think it's not going to be busy, it is. So there's just really no way to tell. Even a full moon, it just doesn't, there's no rhyme or reason.
That's strange. Like perfect weather and then some fire breaks out or I guess you respond to domestic problems too, don't you?
Everything, you name it. You would not believe what goes on in this world.
Wow.
It's probably better than most people don't.
We could do a whole show about that if we wanted to, but maybe some other time.
Sure.
So
sure.
I'm calling you to talk a little bit about your memories of Miss Charlotte. And in the 1980s, you would respond to her when she would give you calls for like, you know, can you take me to church or go grocery shopping? Could you tell me a few of the, you know, stories about that, helping out Charlotte in the 80s?
Yeah, well, I originally met Miss Charlotte at Visuals. We used to go to Visuals on Friday and Saturday nights. I kind of like saw her there in the corner, and then there was a very devout priest who came in and gave lectures on Catholicism. He was actually appointed by John Paul II. He actually, Father John Harden.
Huh.
And that's when I really got to know Miss Charlotte. I saw her there. We got to talk. She called me over, and I would speak to her. And I got to know a little bit more about her. And then she was telling me we helped carry her up the stairs with her wheelchair because she had a really hard time getting around. And the more I found out about her, she told me that she had a house that needed work on it, and so I offered to help her out. And so she invited me over, and come to find out that her house needed a lot of work, and she was disabled. I really didn't know her whole story. There were many things that had happened to her. She had been abused by her husband.
Right.
And she had an operation on one of her legs that ended up being botched up, and so it left her crippled and in a lot of pain. Even though all that was going on, she always tried to be really happy around people, and she had a funny way of talking about our Lord and the Blessed Mother, and she would refer to the devil as Hornsey.
That's right, old Hornsey, up to his tricks again, she would say.
Right, exactly. And we would always, when there was a couple of us over there or whatever, she would always have us pray before our meals and things like that. She tried not to complain about the suffering that she was having. She didn't like to bother people for things, and felt humbled to have to ask people to do things, because, as she told us, she used to always do things for herself. Her and her husband used to enter in all kinds of contests and win all kinds of prizes, and none of that really meant anything to her anymore. And she told about her conversion, how she would go to church, and sometimes they would lock up the church, and she would actually be locked in there, and she always wondered if Christ was in the tabernacle, and she would talk about how she was to pray and ask Jesus if he's really in there, to give her some kind of sign. And then she talked about how she started having locutions, and I had no idea what that was. And she explained to me about, how it was like a private revelation where Christ would speak to her in her heart. And she went to priests about this because she thought she was going crazy. And they said, it's a real thing. And she started writing these things down. And I would always ask Miss Charlotte if God would say anything to her about me. And I was going through a challenge myself because I didn't know what God wanted me to do with my life.
Right.
And so I would be constantly asking her that. She never really, I think at one time she did tell me something, and she didn't really tell me directly anything that he said, but I think she might have told me that he had said something to her about me, but I never knew what it was. But my question was, because I was going through in my heart, I didn't know whether God wanted me to be a priest. I didn't want to be a priest, and I wanted to get married and have kids, and I didn't know what God's vocation was for me, and so I was discerning that, and I was asking Christ if he did want me to become a priest, to put it in my heart. And the reason why this challenge came up is because I was going through a conversion myself, going back to the church because I had left for a while.
Right.
And I was praying all the time. So people ladies would see me up there praying before the Blessed Mother, and they said, you need to become a priest. Or they'd tell me that God told them I should become a priest. And I'm like, well, why is he told me?
Oh, yeah,
Because
that
it's not in my
happens.
heart.
That happens. I bet that happens in a lot of people's minds. If they see a devout gentleman who's praying before the tabernacle, their imaginations gets away with them.
Right. And they don't realize what kind of a stress that causes on a person's life if they don't feel that compelled to do that. You know what I mean?
Yes. And you think, is this from God, or is this just from a overzealous, a church lady?
Right. Exactly. So I was trying to discern that. And meanwhile, I would go over Miss Charlotte's house and help her with different things that she wanted done, like fix a light or put a door up, or either take her shopping or go shopping with her. She had this big car. I don't know if it was a Cadillac but it was a big car.
Big green car.
Right. And she would drive us to the grocery store and give us like a list of stuff, and we'd go in and get it for her because it was too hard for her to go walk around.
That's right.
And then we come back in the car and we go back to her house. And we would just help her with I would just help her with different odds and ends of what she needed. A lot of times she spent talking to us about Christ and, her life and what God meant to her, and how. And one of the things she always said to us, I remember, is about, sure, you can go, it's important to go to weekly mass on Sunday. But if you really love Christ, why don't you just go one more extra day?
Mm-hmm.
And so that really set it in my heart, you know what I mean? So to go to become a daily communicant, and I've found a lot of peace through doing that, especially with my recent challenges.
Yeah, that sounds like something Charlotte would say. She wouldn't say you should go to Mass every day. She would just basically say, stretch your love for Jesus a little more.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Just do one extra thing, you know, and maybe just say a decade of the rosary, or you know, she wouldn't overwhelm you, and she wouldn't push you, and she tried to make things fun, you know.
Oh, yeah, she was a lot of fun. We played tons of card games with her all night long.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so you've been battling having a lot of sufferings lately as a dad whose children have been taken away from you by your ex-wife and brought to Trinidad. And that's been a big battle for you over the last how many years now?
Over 4 years.
4 years, right.
They were taken in, yep. They were taken February of 2010 in direct violation of a U.S. court order. It's been totally cut off from them for the last, since December 23rd, the last time I heard their voice in the background. It's a international battle, and it's a challenge between two countries who are saying they have jurisdiction of a case. Unfortunately, if the children are not turned back to the United States, which I have full custody of, both Gabriel and Anastasia, then they'll never know me until, if they choose to, after they're 18 years old. Right now, I have full custody of the children, but they're being held as wards of the state of Trinidad, placed in the care of Leah.
I see. And is there an upcoming court case to settle this once and for all?
Well, there's been court cases after court cases, and it's been delayed. The last one was in October, and there was supposed to be a home study done by January. It wasn't an order on me, but I put myself through extensive, based on allegations that were made. I put myself through extensive psych evals over 3 days, and they were submitted to the courts in Trinidad as well as a home study, abbreviated home study, and then along with character reference letters and a video we did of my house and my family. So that was supposed to be done in January, and they have recently, in January, they postponed it again until June 13th. So that's the next court date.
Really? Okay, so June 13th, you'll show the video of your friends and family vouching for you.
Well, that was submitted to what they call a probationary officer.
Mm-hmm.
The probationary officer is the one that does the home study. So far, from what we understand, she has not watched it. She still could. They have not communicated with my attorneys. So I am not sure what is going on over there at all. But I do know that there's another hearing. It's a direction hearing on June 13th. And then from there, there'll be, I guess, another hearing after that. That's only set up for a half hour. But the home study is supposed to be completed by then.
Yeah, well, what you showed me was amazing. How much time you must have put into that, and how your family all came out and spoke kind words about you as a loving father. It was really touching. And so you've got a really great family.
I do. I'm blessed. I really am blessed. And everybody is very heartbroken about not being able to be in Gabriel's life. I mean, there's 13 cousins that Gabriel and Anastasia are not having access to. You know, their grandparents here in the United States, and their godparents, and then also their aunts and their uncles who were all very involved in their life that they're being denied access to, and don't know that there's this huge family that loves and misses them here.
Yeah, yeah, it was clear. You have a really touching family. It was clear from that video. And that was so cool. You even had the Monsignor from Immaculate Conception speak on your behalf.
Monsignor, correct. Monsignor Kenny, who's been on EWTN, he's very well known, and he actually consecrated my son, Gabriel, on his baptism day to the Immaculate Heart of Mary.
Holy moly, really? And that's Monsignor Jeremy Kennedy, right?
That's correct. That is correct.
I recognized his face, so that explains it, EWTN.
That's it, precisely. He's very well-educated and well-known Monsignor. You know, speaking of kind of bringing it back to Miss Charlotte again, when there was something happened at one time that Miss Charlotte, just out of the blue, said to me when I was talking to her about wanting to get married and have children, and it just came out of the blue. She said, and I completely had forgotten about it until you approached me about writing something about Miss Charlotte, and it just came back to me, and it just kind of struck me. One of the things that she said, you know, about getting married to somebody that, it wasn't even like we were really in the middle of talking about it, but she just looked at me and said, dealing with a woman from another culture is extremely difficult. And I don't know where that came from, because I never said anything to her about, I wasn't even contemplating meeting somebody from another country or culture. And that was the end of it. I just kind of looked at her, and that was it. But it came to my mind, you know, wow, that obviously Christ had foreseen something happening with me.
Yeah.
Don't you maybe relayed that to Miss Charlotte?
Don't you wish you could have gotten a few more specifics from Miss Charlotte on that moment?
Yes.
Which culture, Charlotte?
Exactly.
Oh man, yeah. I guess that one's a tough one to explain. Well, she did have a writing where, when I typed up most of these writings, about 2,000 pages worth from 73 to 94, and there were a couple of times in the margins she would mention you. She would write in the margin, had to stop writing, Stan was rapping on door, you know, or you remember how in order to get to her house, in order to get in or let her know you were there, you have to knock on her dining room window. Do you remember that?
Right. Because that's the room she stayed in, right?
That's right. And she would never hear us if we knocked on her front door.
Exactly. Yep.
But there was one time where Jesus was speaking to her in 1988 on, I'm looking at the date, December 6th. And I sent it to you, and it wasn't much about you, but the writing is called A Good Spouse, which is applicable to you. And the last couple of paragraphs, Jesus is talking to Charlotte about how he is a good spouse to her and how he sacrifices himself to her. He says, remember, a good spouse sacrifices himself for that relationship. Give me all you can, my child, and accept all the blessings I have in store for you. Go now and show my love to all I place in your path. Tell Stan I'm so proud of him and bless him always. And so that was something about you in one of Charlotte's messages.
That is just so touching, that to think that Jesus would speak my name.
Right.
To, you know, I mean, that just blows me away.
Yeah, and my sister Christine, she would, when she learned about Charlotte's locutions, that was her first question too. You know, does God mention me? And my mother said the same thing. And when I found these messages and started going through them, I was looking like, am I mentioned in here? Am I mentioned? But you got a shout out from Jesus.
That's amen to that. it's good that I'm on his mind.
Yeah, I definitely believe you are. All of us are at every second.
Yeah, right.
Well, are you doing any
And-
more
and that's-
any more car washes to raise money for your legal fees or anything? Like, I guess you wouldn't do that in the wintertime, would you?
No, it's a little difficult, Although it might be good business if we could do it inside.
Oh,
Especially
yeah.
with all the salt,
All the salt on the cars, and everybody's driving around with salt on their cars, right? Was that a
Right.
successful venture for you? You were running those charity car washes to raise money for your legal fees in the summer times.
We did so many different things. I was and have been completely blessed by a person that I knew who owned a gas station who had a great corner for doing car washes. So that was great. We did other raffles. We had a bull roast. We did so many things because I was being hit from all directions. In the beginning, I had legal fees in Trinidad and in the United States, and between both of them, I had spent well over $200,000 in lawyers' fees, and the fees continue. Fortunately, I just couldn't keep up that pace. There was just no way, and they did pull me out of a deep hole that I was digging financially, trying to battle these between traveling to see my children and traveling to Trinidad to try to fight the battle. I just couldn't keep it up any longer, and I even took a second loan out of my house of over $80,000 to try to keep up with those fees.
Wow.
So it did kind of pull me out of the hole where the way it is now, I have lawyers' fees here. But my attorneys have been very charitable toward me, even though their standard fees are quite expensive.
Mm-hmm.
They have not gouged me. A lot of attorneys will charge you for every minute that you speak to them on the phone, and they've been very merciful toward me. I have to pay them something, obviously, but fortunately, with working the shortage of paramedics, and being able to work the overtime, I've been able to keep up with the fees. We may do something more in the springtime or summer. There's been talk of doing another fundraiser to try to get ahead of the game again.
Did you have a website?
website?
Did you have a website connected to PayPal, some way that people could online, if they felt called to, make a donation to help you out?
Yeah, there is a website. It's hunkskids.org. And if people want to know more, it has the legal documents of there pertaining to my case. Also with links to interviews that have been that were early on in the challenge. I did have a link that people could make donations to. I believe on there will be an address if somebody wants. My sister Peggy is like the treasurer, and we have an account set up for the children for the legal fees, specifically for that. And I will I'll tell you what, that's a good idea to put my PayPal address up there. So if people do want to make a donation, they can do that directly through PayPal.
Yeah, that can't hurt. So hunkskids.org.
That's correct.
And then is there a link to that Channel 13 News story on you that I saw a couple years back?
Yeah, there's a Channel 11
Channel
news
11.
story and Channel 2. Kelly Swoop was the first one to take on the case. So yes, I think there's 3 different links on there.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. Well, and I'll definitely include your website on the show notes to this episode. So if people, need to, can get it off of my website and the show notes that come along with my podcast, which is at lifeandlovewords.com. So, and then of course people will definitely pray for you now that they know your story. and your character. So, Stan, thanks a lot for your time tonight. I know you're super busy.
Well, thank you too, Brian, and most especially pray for my children. They're the innocent ones in all this, and they don't deserve this at all. They deserve to know their daddy, who loves them so much, and his family that loves them here. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. We will all pray for Gabriel and Anastasia, and I'll be asking Miss Charlotte to pray for them especially.
Amen. Thank you. God bless you.
God bless you too, Stan. Bye.
All right, Brad. Bye-bye.
And that was Stan Hunkovich right there. Great guy, great conversation I had with him. And yeah, it's heartbreaking to hear a father wanting so much to have his children back, and the hurdles he's been having to go through for the last 4 years. And get this, Channel 2 News, ABC in Baltimore, has done not one, but 2 stories on him, and to getting the message out about how you all can help. And if you want to help out, you want to find out, or you want to watch the videos, the news reports on him, go to hunkskids.org. I may have said .com earlier. It's hunkskids.org. That's hunkskids.org. And you can see his kids and get the full story, see the press release. And they have a widget on there where you can make a donation to help Hunk, a Baltimore firefighter, pay his legal bills, or just tell him the words of encouragement. And I'll put this up on lifeandlovewords.com. I'll put his 2 video stories up there as well, so you could go right to our website if you'd like. And we can at least say some prayers for our good friend Stan Hunkovich, who was so helpful to Miss Charlotte back in the 1980s. So that's it. That's our episode on suffering. I tell you, there are so many more writings and messages for Charlotte on the topic of suffering, but that I just basically picked one and went with it. There were so many to choose, and one isn't any better than the other. But I put a handful of them up there on lifeandlovewords.com for you, where you can just go on up there and click away and read some of these messages. I also have a chapter on it on the free ebook, the 100-page ebook that you can get just for putting your email into our system. And you'll get updates when I put up more posts of Charlotte's writings as we go. I also want you to get your feedback on the MP3 audio samples that I've put up on iTunes. Quick story. I listened to a whole bunch of voiceover actors on Fiverr.com, and I did it with my eyes closed so I wouldn't see what the actors look like. And when I heard this guy's voice, he just channeled the words of Jesus beautifully. Well, he was talking about, I don't know, whatever, but I imagined him reading Charlotte's writings, and he won over all the guys with the cool British accents. He had the voice. And I only emailed with him back and forth and never learned his name till finally I saw his name somewhere embedded in a photo of his face. And I found out his name is Bob Doyle, and he's a professional actor. And he was in a Law of Attraction movie called The Secret. Bob Doyle has been teaching the Law of Attraction for years, and I've been very interested in it too. And I know that there's some conflicts with it, with the Catholic Church. I'd be interested in to hear if someone is an expert on it. But however, I've watched all of Bob's videos, and he's a fantastic teacher, and he's really on to something in terms of, let's say, letting God give you what he wants to give you without getting in the way. And I really think that's how I found him. Well, he has since done another 14 writings, voiceover audio recordings, which I now have. And I'm thinking whether or not I'm going to put them up on iTunes, or if I'm going to give them away for people who, reach out to me. So stay tuned. I will be giving away some of them for sure. Stay tuned. There's more than what we have on iTunes. But if you do, I recommend you get the ones on iTunes and put them on your phone and listen to them in the morning. They are very powerful and can put you at peace. And that's our episode. Thank you so much. God bless, and see you next week.
to sharing more of Charlotte's stories and revelations? Join us at lifeandlovewords.com, where you'll find a free ebook and an exclusive audio recording of one of her most inspiring messages.